Hey, what's up? Thanks for clicking. My name's Vigo, and welcome to my podcast. Apparently, man, I can remember like 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh man, I should make a video explaining my concept. Probably keep it around 20 minutes or so. Yeah, that guy was stupid. But anyways, I've tried to make this a little bit more approachable for you by chopping this video up. As you can see, there's an index up on screen. Down below, you can find its corresponding timestamps. Please absolutely feel free to navigate around to the parts you may be interested in listening to. If you just want to quickly hear what my idea consists of and want to hold off on any background or explanation, just feel free to skip ahead to the elevator pitches section. Those are basically kind of the cliff notes. Stuck on an elevator, let me give you my best pitch really quickly. And after watching those, if any of that interests you, feel free to explore the rest of this video and check out some of the chapters. And if you like the ideas, you could definitely go check out the deep dives. I really try to cover most aspects of my pitch there. So, yeah, if you want me to expand upon those, I definitely do in great detail and too much detail. This is all for fun at the end of the day. Maybe with a little bit of luck, this could get the attention of someone over at Boombit, and they can at least get some feedback out of this and maybe just a little bit of inspiration. But yeah, as you figure out where you want to go, I'm just going to go ahead and get started here. I stumbled upon a conversation Papa Kicks was having on Discord with players where he was talking about changes he would like to see happen in Dark Forest, as well as the new ideas he was kicking around for ADF, which has since come out. As the conversation was coming to a close, he did welcome additional feedback and encourage more discussion on the matter. I ended up agreeing with points made by both Papa Kicks and the players, but I felt like no one answer was a great solution. So that got my imagination going, and the concept I was kicking around became just too big for a Discord response. A Reddit post with walls and walls of text sounded just absolutely not fun for anybody. And ultimately, I figured showcasing the idea with visuals would help convey the concept nicely, so hence this video. To speed things along, I've been showing excerpts from said Discord discussion up on screen. Feel free to pause and review those as you'd like. However, I have compiled a list of key points and takeaways to use as inspiration to possibly find that all encompassing solution. Here's the compiled list of issues being addressed and debated in that Discord discussion. First, I'll compare Papa Kicks' solution to these points just to see where it shines and also where it may fall short. After that, we'll start in on my take on a solution to this list. Papa Kicks' solution is to revamp Dark Forest to make it, shorter, easier, add a draft, and releasing ADF with a new hunter draft system. He says he is messing around with the idea of updating the random draft model in general by increasing it from 6 to 8 hunters, which we currently have, to a pool of around 20 with one guaranteed God pick hunter. This pick would be added to each pool of randomized hunters to alleviate round ending draft picks. So that's his concept in a nutshell. Let's take it to the list and see how it holds up. So, number one, players optimize out the fun. Yes, adding in random hunters does add longevity to it and keeps players somewhat interested in that they can't bring their own lists and keep running the same thing over and over because it is quote unquote efficient. It's optimized. So, yes, his concept of adding in randomized heroes does combat the first point. Number two, players complain that running the same 10 hunters every game is boring. Number one and number two are very similar. Number one, players optimize out the fun. That's more of a broad statement for the game as a whole. Number two is a very specific, but in this case, they're very similar. So again, Papa Kicks' solution satiates number two. Number three, poor RNG luck holds back player progression, aka random rewards. Unfortunately, Papa Kicks' solution doesn't really address rewards at all. He does talk about in Discord a little bit about how he wants to get rid of the concept of C9s, which are just doing the first 3 levels and then restarting. He wants to backload rewards so it incentivizes players to complete 10 levels of Dark Forest. But unfortunately, here, that doesn't really address any scraps or things like that. So it's not addressed number 3. Number 4, progressing is made easier with static hunter choices as a new player can prioritize the same roster of hunters to level them up and awaken them. So unfortunately, Papa Kicks did address this point directly in Discord, and he either didn't agree or didn't fully understand the concept, whatever it might be. Unfortunately, his solution doesn't pertain to this, so 4 is left off the list. Number 5, randomness creates an issue, and it may very well be you are given no viable hunter picks. In my opinion, this is currently the only aspect of the game I actively dislike, and it overshadows my enjoyment of randomized hunter draft just in general. Now, when you're fully geared out, this isn't as big of an issue by any means, but When you're coming up, especially if you're a new player, the frustration is extremely real when you brick a level 5 chaos run and the last level happens to be that one dungeon you really need the gems for. I can only imagine how that would feel on a C27 run in Dark Forest, which happens to be a point a player brought up directly in this Discord chat. Papa Kicks' solution addresses this in two different ways. First, raising the hunter pool size from 6 to 8 all the way up to 20, plus a guaranteed God Pick hunter, almost ensures you will have something to work with at all times. I'd still wager there could be some rare situation where a God Pick hunter isn't exactly the right tool for the job, and your remaining 19 picks are all just lower tiered options. That is where Papa Kicks' second solution comes into effect. Now, this solution wasn't exactly stated in this particular Discord discussion. However, he has confirmed on Discord that the team will continue to release 2.0 versions of older heroes, bringing their power levels much more in line with current metas. Succubus is a prime example of this, taking arguably the worst hunter in the game and buffing it all the way up to an S tier pick. This would ensure that inside a draft pool of 20 heroes, regardless of your god pick hunter or not, there should always be multiple viable options to choose from. So I would definitely say Papa Kicks' solution addresses this point nicely. Number 6, Abyssal Dark Forest will be random picks. Why change Dark Forest? Now that we actually do have the new draft system out for ADF, why not just leave Dark Forest? Especially considering the design philosophy has been kind of revealed from the designers. ADF is now meant to be the mode where you go farm scraps and schematics efficiently, and then they want Dark Forest to be more of the place that you go farm your gems. So they do want you to keep playing both game modes. So again, it still brings up the debate where some people like static picks, some people like randomization. Which one do you pick? Why not have both? ADF is already random. Why not just leave DF the way it is and save yourself time revamping and rebalancing it? So unfortunately, number 6 left off the list as well. So number 7, a guaranteed God pick in random selection doesn't solve players optimizing the fun out of it, as it will most likely still select the most optimal choice. I still feel like this is applicable here. Even though you have a random selection and you're really mixing up the list, and a guaranteed S tier hunter may not be the hunter that you want to use. For example, you might get Abyss Orb relatively early on, and you would want to hang on to Abyss Orb for maybe a more difficult level later on. I still feel as though, for the most part, people who are optimizing out the fun are still going to optimize out the fun. By that, I mean, sure, maybe they have an interesting choice of do I use Abyss Orb now or later? But for the most part, they're still going to try to pick the most powerful hunter for the current level that they're at, compared to the alternative, which I believe is what the designers want in general, which is why don't you pick a fun pick? If you have 2 or 3 S tier picks and maybe a handful of A tier picks, any player that is already optimizing out their own fun will never pick a B tier or C tier hunter for the fun of it. Unfortunately, there's just no incentivization. If they're not picking hunters for fun already, they're not going to be doing it in this mode as well. Even though random pick shatters the concept of predetermined lists, there will still remain go-to obvious choices to pick in each draft. And I feel like we would just end up in the same place at the end of it, where players would just get bored with the same old picks anyways. So unfortunately, I would still feel as though number 7 would be unresolved by Papa Kicks' solution. So, in its simplest form, my solution is pretty unrevolutionary, but hopefully it'll be quite effective. And that would be to incentivize the players. When you incentivize players to play the way that you would like them to, the incentives must now be taken into account by min maxers when deciding an optimal way to play. To start, my idea would utilize both hunter select methods simultaneously, that meaning random pick mode and static pick mode at the same time. The desired outcome of fun is a hard thing to obtain when you have to pigeonhole half your players into playing a way that they would otherwise prefer not to. I, for one, can and do appreciate the pros of random hunter select, but as I discussed earlier, that enjoyment is easily overshadowed due to the somewhat common situation of bricking a run in the hunter select menu through no fault of your own. Your only counterplay in a situation like that is a one time use reroll that is also dependent on RNG potentially giving you equivalent or even worse selections. The inverse of this we can actually already see in game. With there currently being no incentive for players to pick a fun choice amongst the static list of hunters, players end up opting for optimal picks in the form of hunter lists, which they rarely stray from. Point being, without any form of intervention, the mechanics of both random and static hunter selection have their pros and cons, causing an inevitable divide in player preference. By keeping both means of hunter select simultaneously, both player preferences are appeased. So now, obviously, question now becomes, how can you have both means of hunter select simultaneously? Why would anyone pick heroes from a randomized list when they could simply scroll down and select any hunter they want from a static list? And that's where the bulk of my proposal comes into effect. The true incentivization comes from offering bonus rewards for picking randomized heroes to offset the risk. The rewards would be relatively low so as not to alienate your player base who would still prefer to play static hunter selection. They would just be enough to steadily guide the player base towards a means of potentially more fulfilling gameplay crafted by the developers. My first pitch is meant to be a practical solution. It is a relatively straightforward enough concept that wouldn't be too much of a stretch of the imagination to envision some version or iteration of it being added to the game at some point. Using the current version of Dark Forest as a reference, the idea would be to add in the traditional random hunter pick system while also maintaining the free hunter pick system just beneath it. The player would have the option to select their hunter from either pool. The incentive for players to select random picks over a static selection, which follows a constructed list, would be the addition of Dark Forest gems. The gem rewards would be very small quantities, but good enough to make players and even min-maxers stop and think, I may as well pick that. This reward would increase with each successful level clear utilizing a random hunter, adding a push your luck element, making players give thought on whether they would like to attempt a higher level clear with a subpar hunter or falling back to a static hunter choice if they feel unable to clear. The quantities of bonus rewards would still be low enough in general so as not to alienate players who may prefer static picks or who are just unable to push with random hunters in general. All choices are available and viable to a player, presenting them with a path to a level of engagement that is suited for them. My second pitch isn't a separate concept. Rather, it takes a stab at curing the overarching ailment inherent to the current game's character select philosophy. Hopefully, this idea could passively satiate all the previously discussed core issues while also tackling issues such as offering fun interactions both with hunter selection and with teammates, problem solving for the benefit of the player and not simply a means to create an obstacle to overcome in order to complete content, a framework designed for endless replayability/reusability. Framework would remain the same, while content new or old can be modified at the developer's behest. The system would be utilized across the board for old, current, and future content. Last but not least, ultimately focusing on player satisfaction through meaningful self-agency. Now, there's a lot to cover and explore with this idea, so be sure to check out the deep dive on this pitch a little later, where I will fully explain, showcase, and discuss all aspects of this system. The idea would again simultaneously use both random and static hunter selection, but this time with a twist. You'll be given a pool of 8 randomized hunters that will be assigned to 4 separate columns containing 2 hunters each. The first 3 columns are randomly assigned a loot value, which will be graphically represented and will generate a small reward for each column based on its corresponding rarity loot table. Once the loot has been assigned to a column, it would be displayed underneath said column, indicating that if you were to pick one of the 2 hunters directly above it, you will gain the reward at the end of the game when all other loot is collected. The chances of a specific loot rarity being assigned to any of the first 3 columns might loosely look like something such as 59.5% chance for green, 30% chance for blue, 10% chance for purple, and 0.5% chance for mythics. The 4th column would be entirely unique from its 3 counterparts. For starters, when it came to Hunter Select, it would consist of 2 blacked out hero portraits. If selected, these 2 mystery hunter options would randomly assign a hunter for you to play during the round. They would have a quote unquote reveal me gem cost, and if purchased, would show the mystery hunter before selecting. Although meant as a deterrent from revealing hunters each round, The player may choose to purchase this if they desperately need to review their options when making an important loot decision, as an example. The rewards for choosing these mysterious hunters are pulled from their own unique loot pool and are designed around providing boons instead of tangible loot. These are tremendously unique and offer incredible reward versatility with potentially immense reward combinations. If a player does not like their randomly chosen hunter or just doesn't seem to think this round's rewards were worth the risk of losing the level, they may scroll down and select any hunter they wish from the static list as per usual, with no added benefit, but ensuring their progression to the next level where the next batch of loot options awaits them. This is very much a live to fight another day option. Because the premise of my proposal is asking to inject a steady amount of rewards into the economy of this game, I'd like to take just a moment to touch on it and its ramifications. And as luck would have it, there actually is a separate discussion happening right now on Discord that involves Papa Kicks, and it goes over the blowback of an in game deal that someone has. Now, feel free to pause here and read through this all if you'd like. And as you can see, Papa Kicks is speaking more conceptually and isn't giving any specific data. However, he does simply showcase his point that monetization in games is far more intricate than one may initially think. Boombit is a business at the end of the day, and the longer that they can retain players, the longer they can keep creating heroes, new game modes, new chase items, and even keep their lights on back at their office. So it's kind of a win win for us. I would imagine that the economy within this game is a pretty hard balancing act, and throwing any source of farmable resources would really throw things out of whack. I've tried to refrain from presenting quantities of drops, as all that would ultimately have to be decided by the company, anyways, if something like this were ever to get added to the game. With a few notable exceptions, I try to describe these rewards more in generalities, such as a purple drop should give higher quantities than a comparable common drop, and obvious things like that. I do try to temper my ignorance of Boombit's behind the scenes monetization by just trying to focus on the systems I'm pitching. So now that I just finished explaining how I won't suggest any quantities for rewards, let me go ahead and demonstrate my first pitch exclusively using quantities as examples of proposed rewards. In this case, I think it would just be easier to use numbers rather than random variables, just to help you guys follow along while showcasing this idea. These numbers are just to demonstrate the accumulating nature of the rewards given. So, in a mode that is farmable with no lockout restrictions and is already the main source of farming currently in the game, any bonus rewards would have to be minor as to not topple the economy. This reward would start off incredibly small, but could stack on itself, rewarding players that choose to push their luck with more random hunters than not. This would also inherently promote clearing more levels of Dark Forest instead of any gimmicky crystal farming strategies that might be out there. However, Papa Kicks did say that he's going to be revamping the reward structure on normal Dark Forest to promote people to clear all 10 levels, and this is just another way of doing that. As an example, let's say your first random hunter clear would award you with +1 Dark Forest gem. A second random clear would give you +2 Dark Forest gems. A third clear would be +3, a fourth +4, a fifth +5, etc., all the way to 10. Let's say a player clears all 10 levels of Dark Forest, but they only used 6 randomized hunters. So in that specific case, their bonus rewards would be 21 Dark Forest gems. So as you can see with the given example, quite a bit of extra gems can be farmed this way just by playing a mode that you'd already be playing anyways. Although I would argue that consistently clearing C27s utilizing all random hunters is not exactly a reliable venture, if this does prove to be too much of an influx of player rewards, some interesting caps can be set in place. And yes, side note, I would still say trying to push maximum crystal clears would ultimately be a more lucrative way to farm Dark Forest gems in general, as opposed to just, hey, let me use all random hunters, clear as many levels as I can, clearing the minimum amount of crystals that I can. And as for the caps, there could be a cap on the reward increase at a specific hunter clear count. For example, let's say in this instance, you put the cap at level 5. So if you successfully clear 5 levels in a single run using random hunters, and you would like to continue clearing using random hunters, instead of now getting +6 gems for your 6th clear, +7 gems for your 7th clear, etc., this would cut the reward from clearing 10 levels using random hunters from 55 Dark Forest gems down to 40. If that is still too much, set the random hunter cutoff at the 3rd hunter clear. This would make the reward go from 55 Dark Forest gems down to 27. This would alleviate the concept of the rich getting richer. Players who are bissed out, they can clear any content, any number of crystals with their eyes closed, not even looking at the screen, with random hunters, as opposed to somebody who's just entering Dark Forest and they are barely able to clear any levels, let alone using randomized hunters. So it'd kind of be a little bit of a checks and balance there. Another option would be a simple diminishing returns formula utilizing the aforementioned cap system. So if we take a look at my terribly boring spreadsheet, it's got some good information on it. So for example, let's just say you clear 10 levels utilizing 10 random hunters. And just to be clear, it doesn't have to be 10 random heroes in a single game. It would just be over the course of a 24-hour period, how many hunters are you clearing that are random in this game mode? So let's just assume in this situation, just to keep it simple, you are either playing perfectly or you're a bot. Either way, you are clearing all 10 levels each game using nothing but random heroes. As we can see with your rewards, they go up just the way you'd anticipate them. One gives you one, second clear gives you two, third clear gives you three, all the way down to 10. So if you were to clear 10 levels, you'd get your full reward amount, which would be, in this case, 55. Now, your second 10 random hunters, you can see that the cap has actually moved down to 9. You'd get the same amount of rewards for the same amount of levels cleared. But as soon as you get to 10, instead of getting 10 Dark Forest gems, it's capped at 9. Now you're getting 9. For your 30th win, same thing. The cap now moves down to 8. And as soon as you get to 9, you're instead getting 8. And this continues on. Your 40th, your 50th, your 60th, your 70th. You can see how drastically this impairs you once you get to your 90th run. And then ultimately, if you manage to get 100 level clears in a 24-hour period, it is completely capped, and you're only getting a total of 10 gems per Dark Forest clear. Now, if we come over here and look at this first column here are your hunter clears. So this is your 10th, your 20th, your 30th, all the way down to 100. These are the rewards right here. So for your first 10, you'd get your 55. For your 20th, you'd only get 54, all the way down to 10, which is your 100th level clear. If you were to add up all these rewards you'd be getting, you would get, after around 100 level clears within a 24-hour period, 385 Dark Forest gems. Now compare that to 100 runs where there is no cap whatsoever. You would normally be getting 550 Dark Forest gems. So the difference with this diminishing return system is 165. This number would get way bigger if a player decided to go past their 100 clears with random hunters. They're only getting 10 gems per clear. So this number would only be going up by 10 each time, whereas this number would be going up by 55 every single time. This is just a demonstration of how these diminishing returns could work. It slowly whittles down to not be as efficient, so you don't feel like you're having a FOMO experience. I have to play to get my maximum rewards. Not really. Just do a few games a day like you probably normally would, and you'd probably be good.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Now, the capping system and the diminishing return system just be easier and more straightforward if you just gave a flat static reward, so +2 Dark Forest gems every time you clear with a random hunter. But I think that increasing the reward for each successful clear incentivizes the player to push their boundaries and their luck. This solution maintains player agency and allows the player to participate as much as they feel like, incentivizing them to make more interesting choices they ordinarily would not make on their own. This concept is very similar to the crystal breaking mechanic in Dark Forest currently. They are there for you to break if you think you can or want to, and would be rewarded for doing so. Real quick before I get into the explanation, I had to update the UI a little bit for character select just because I was adding so much stuff. So I just want to kind of showcase those changes real fast. So these are both screen grabs from in-game. Over here on the left, you got your random character select. Over here on the right, you got your static. Top, obviously, map and boss modifiers and all that stuff. So what I went ahead and did is I added everything to these collapsible and expandable windows. These buttons can actually already be found in-game in your user profile. They're actually pretty nice. I hope Boombit kind of tries to use these a little bit more wherever possible. They just kind of clean stuff up and make text easier to read and all that good stuff. But anyways, so you got your three categories. Next dungeon is going to be obviously the next dungeon you'll be working on, what level, boss modifiers, menu modifiers, all that good stuff. Challenge select is kind of what I've dubbed the new random hero selection mode. Hero select, hunter select, whatever you want to call it. That's just kind of your traditional static hunter selection. So if we go ahead and open up some of these, the next dungeon window is basically the same. There's a scroll bar so you can scroll down and check out your minion stats. If I wanted to open up both that and challenge select to get a more traditional view, I can. So obviously this would be your hunter select and your rewards, which we'll get into in just a second. But just as a quick comparison, like, this is your traditional window. This is the new proposal. So anyways, if we go ahead and close these up real fast, we can open up something a little cleaner. So this would just be if you just want to do randoms and, try to get your rewards and stuff, you might just have this open. Or you can plop open your hero/hunter selection. That way, if these randomized picks aren't so great, you can just easily come down here and just grab whatever. Obviously not necessary, but you could. And then last option, if you just want to have your hero selection over, maybe you're a new player or whatnot, and you don't really feel confident in running random heroes and things like that, then here you go. Here's your traditional static window. All right, so let's start talking about challenge select mode. So when you're looking at this, you are going to be randomly assigned 8 different hunters. Those hunters are going to be broken up into 4 separate columns. The first 3 columns are going to be randomly assigned a loot value. That loot value will then generate the rewards based off of a loot table that corresponds to that loot value. So, for example, column 1 here is green. Its reward, in this case gold, was randomly generated from the green loot table, which is separate from the other loot tables. And I actually have a graphic of all that, so we'll take a look at that in just a second. But same concept for purple and blue, and then the coveted mythic. When it comes to these things spawning, in this case, let's talk about mythic. When a mythic drops in one of the other game modes, it's always like, oh, did I just see what I think I just saw? I wanted to maintain that in that when you're farming this, you'll be so many games in, and you'll just be seeing green after green after green with some blues and like an occasional purple. That when all of a sudden a red pops up, I want it to be like the needle on the record just coming to a screeching halt. What did I just see? Oh man, it's a schematic as the reward. Can I collect that by either using Renderman and Wizard? And obviously, in this case, the answer is no, because yeah. But that would then lead over to this 4th column, which is kind of like your saving grace. This 4th column here has 2 mystery heroes. You can't see who they are, obviously. What would happen here is you would select this hunter, and as soon as you confirm and you spawn into the game, it would generate a random hero for you to play with. So, in this case, I click on this guy, hit OK, and I spawn in with
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
you know. Or you can spend a small gem fee to reveal their portrait and see who your hunter would be. So in this very specific case, when you actually have a mythic, I would argue it's probably worth spending at least 10 gems, if not both. 20 gems here. So you get for a total of 30 gems just to reveal both of these. Because who knows, you might have an S tier hunter in here, and it's just like, yes, let me pick that. Because if I win here, I'll collect this special reward down here. This 4th column will always offer a unique special reward. And again, I have a loot table for that. I'll go into depth explaining all that because I feel like this 4th column is really where the real fun and enjoyment and replayability comes from this whole concept that I'm pitching. So we'll get into that. But what this one would do is if you were to beat the next level with one of these 2 mystery heroes, you would collect all of the shown rewards. So in this case, you'd get the maze gems, you'd get the daily maze fast forward button, and then you'd also collect a completed schematic. So yeah, this would be totally awesome. The first one's relatively cheap. It's meant to be like, hey, you can do this if you want. The second one is meant to be more expensive. And again, the quantity of gems here, that's for Boombit to decide how much they want that to be. And then the last thing on these mystery hunters, I think it would be really cool if these hunters themselves were pulled from their own independent pool of hunters. And by that I mean if I were to open up, hunter hero select down here. If I were to pick, say, Axemaster, Axemaster down here would be grayed out and unavailable to pick because you've already used him. And obviously he wouldn't show up here in your random picks anymore because yeah, once a hunter's been used, they're used. I thought it'd be really cool if an added perk or an added bonus to these guys is that they have their own individual, hunter select. So, for example, let's just say you really like Abyss Orb. Abyss Orb is amazing. You've already used them on, let's say level 3 or whatever. of Dark Forest because they popped up here. Yeah, in this situation, wouldn't it be awesome if you had a mythic here and you were just praying for an S tier hero and you're on level 9 of Dark Forest or whatever, and boom, Abyss Orb pops up here again. So you'd actually get to use Abyss Orb twice in your run. And using Abyss Orb saves the day and allows you to do your collect all and collect all this. It's just very much a stars that would have to align type thing to make use of double dipping on a hero when they come in clutch. But I just think it's kind of a cool little thing, to kind of help alleviate this. Like, I got, let's just say, for example, I have nothing but, C and D tier hunters up here, but like the rewards are really good. And then, Abyss Orb's back and he saves the day. And that'd just be really fun. For the monthly subscription, for those who pay for that, this would be a cool little perk to add in there. They're like, hey, every first mystery hero will always be revealed. So every time you come into this screen, you'll always see who this character is. This one will still be blacked out and still cost the 20 gems because, again, it's supposed to be a deterrent. You're not really supposed to use this every single round. I mean, unless you're a whale, but whales be whaling. So what are you going to do? But yeah, for the average player, coming in here and seeing a total of 7 hunters to choose from just makes it just a little bit easier. And I think it's a fun little perk to encourage people to support the game and the devs and stuff like that. So yeah, so coming back to the original screen, hopefully it's kind of straightforward enough. I kind of touched on it, but yeah, in order to actually do this, you would just select, for example, if I wanted to do Raging Orc or Torment to collect gold for some reason, I clearly would want to pick one of these guys, but you just select Torment, and if you successfully cleared the level, you would be rewarded with this reward right here, in this case, gold. The reward will be given to you at the end of your run, whether it's a successful run or a failed run. Obviously, you need to beat this next level, but let's say you're playing Chaos or whatever, and you end up failing on level 4. You still get to walk away with the rewards from level 1, 2, and 3 in that case. So yeah, once you beat a level, you will definitely get this reward. And again, we're going to go into the loot tables for all this so you can see, but I just want it to be known that like green is going to be the most common loot. For example, let me showcase. Boom. This is going to be a very common sight because again, there's a 60% chance for this loot table to show up. So yeah, these pieces of loot here are going to be very low in quantity and quality. And I may as well just show you some other examples of some loot tables. There's another one. So this might be a little bit more common. 1 blue in there with 2 greens. And these are also giving you some examples of some of the loot you can see. Example 3, this is actually a really good one. 2 blues and 1 purple. That's really good drops there. But you can start to see the rewards do get better with blue just in general. And obviously with purple. And then you've already seen this one. And here is one last one I may as well show you. Boom, there's another example. So a blue, a red, a green. In this case, do everything you can to get this type of thing. But anyways, let's go talk about the main let's go talk about the loot tables. All right, so here we have our different reward pools. Let me pull up a Dark Forest loot example. Here you go. So to start things off, we'll take a look at these percentages on the side. I just have 3 quick points I want to make. First of all, clearly Boombit would have to decide what they feel comfortable giving out as loot, like what are the drop chances. Second of all, the not so obvious point is even though I say a blanket statement such as purple has a 10% chance to drop, a mythic has a half of 1% chance to drop, that's not necessarily how the math works on the back end of these, and I just want to make that distinction. Moving forward, we're just going to keep it simple and just go with it. Hey, mythics have a 0.5% chance to drop, epics have a 10% chance to drop, and so forth. I'll pop the hood on this math later in chapter 9 when I give my last thoughts about this system. Spoiler alert, because there are 3 columns, the probabilities are all kind of wonky. So these percentages for them actually to drop behind the scenes would have to be lower. Again, we'll talk about that. And then lastly, with these percentages is the concept of spawn rate versus claim rate. So using purple as an example here, just because there's a 10% chance for it to show up doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a 10% claim rate from players in general. There's a lot of factors that obviously go into that, such as, player skill, player gear, the level, the modifiers on the map. The hunter, you could just get a suboptimal hunter in general. A player might look at a reward that pops up in purple and be like, you know what, I would really like that, but I'd rather not risk it. And I'll just pick one of the blue or green rewards and just continue my run. Like I'd rather finish my Dark Forest 10 run. Rule of thumb, just because it says 10%, that doesn't necessarily mean a 10% claim rate. So when we're looking at this, you can see that there's basically a reduction of rewards as we get to higher rarities. That's for a couple of reasons. First of all, if, let's just say down here for Mythic, you have 7 rewards total. If you had 7 rewards total for, let's say, the green common tier, there's a 60% chance you're going to be running into common rewards. So you'll just be seeing those 7 rewards over and over and over again. First of all, that's just a boring experience. But two, let's take these stones for an example. If you only had 8 stones for your basic common reward, that would just make target farming gemstones much easier. Because it has a 60% chance of showing up, granted, there's 8 different options, you could just target farm these over and over again. And not to say these are going to be high rewards here, but farming stones and only stones will add up after a while. So to combat that, you bloat out the tier of the rewards. So you put in a lot of other, in this case, common rewards, aka junk, especially if you're a higher tiered player. You're not really concerning yourself with this type of stuff. But as you progress in the rarity, you start to lose the rewards by about, I don't know, I'd say about 25% in reduction each time ish. So these rewards, while definitely better than green just in general, you have a better chance of getting the things in this tier that you'd like. Same thing with purple, obviously. You've got much less rewards, and these are a little bit more coveted. These would actually be considered good rewards. And then obviously the ever elusive mythic. These are the best rewards in the game. So you don't want this tier bloated out. When you get a mythic to drop, you want it to feel as though you're being rewarded with a mythic. So that's the concept of how this loot could be distributed. And you'll notice for the most part, there's not any quantities associated with these rewards, except for, a few exceptions here. And again, I talked about that previously, why that might be, but we can still derive concepts of what these tiers of rewards would offer. So, for example, common, you'd want low quality and low quantity. Because you have a 60% chance of running into these rewards. So, for example, if I were to open up this little guy, I would argue this is going to be a very common sight. 60% of the time for each column, it's going to be green. You've got 3 columns, pretty good chances you'll see nothing but greens here. Another common one would obviously be something like this: 30% chance for a blue, 60% for green. This might be pretty common. So, point being, when you're farming, you're going to be running into a lot of green rewards. So, you don't want to have these be high in quantity, obviously not even in quality, but quantity for sure. So, for example, if we were to pick, say, this white stone, let's just say it would be guaranteed a level 1, no exceptions. It would be a level 1 stone. For something that could potentially pop up a lot, and granted, we've bloated this out, we've diluted the pool, so it would be hard to target farm white stones, again, by design. The quantity would be somewhere, let's just give it a range of, 1 to 2 level 1 stones. Very, very minimal. The higher level players are basically going to scoff at this. And again, that's kind of the point of the green tier of loot. These are more supposed to be an incentive to say, hey, instead of just picking from the static tree of hunters, you may as well grab a white gem just for free. Considering, let's say it's a level 2 dark forest, you're going to beat it with any hunter in the game. Not a problem. Why not just pick something? Oh, I'm low on undead stones. Like, why not? I may as well. That's kind of the point of green. When you start getting into the higher tiers of blue, this is where the rewards start to open up a little bit. Give it a once over, give it some thought. For example, now instead of having all your stones laid out here, you have, again, in the desire to reduce bloat, you've consolidated all of your stone picks into this one perk, basically. And this is obviously, when you select it, you get to select what corresponding gem reward you want from any of the stones in the game. As far as this being located on the blue tier of rewards, I would say this would still have to be low quality. The perk being that now you get to pick which one you want. So this actually does allow you to target farm a little bit easier than, say, getting a gemstone from up here. So let's just say this would still be a level 1, but now let's say it has a range of dropping, say, 2 to 3 level 1 gems. When you get down into purple, same concept, but now it gets even better. But maybe it would be a guaranteed level 2 stone, and it would drop a range of, say, 1 to 3 level 2 stones. Now that's significantly better than blue. And then obviously when you get down to mythic, again, you want a mythic to feel like an actual crazy reward. Let's just say this would be 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3 guaranteed level 4 gem of any color that you want, that would be pretty good. And I say pretty good for all of these rewards just in general because there's a modifier that we all have to keep in mind, and that is the fourth column of rewards right here. Now, some of these rewards have really good modifiers on loot values and things like that, which we're going to be discussing just in a few minutes here. But keep that in mind when we go over these rewards and think about the implications that it has on this loot table. Changing 1 to 3 tier 4 gems into, say, double that amount, it's pretty good. These rewards can get pretty crazy. And again, going back to 60% chance on common items, these modifiers that are out there, you'll be able to collect, if you use them properly, multiple rewards at the same time. So even though the quantity and quality is very low, there are ways, if you play this right, that you can really rake in a bunch of these simultaneously at the same time. So over a long enough timeline, this stuff would add up, especially in blue, particularly in purple, and hands down in red. So this is an example of possible Dark Forest rewards. Let's see what happens if we start looking at a reward table for, say, newer players. This one I call the Dragon Kraken Yeti reward tree. This is an introductory loot table for brand new players starting to dip their toes into all of the mazes and the dungeons. And this is kind of what I'm referring to when I say that this entire system isn't just, say, for Dark Forest or Abyssal Dark Forest, but a system that can be deployed throughout the entire game in what I would call backwards and forwards compatible. This would be an example of what I mean by backwards compatible. You can take this system and tweak all the rewards so that it matches the tier of content that players are currently engaged with. So even though this is an example of Dragon Kraken Yeti, you can have another one for Maze, Abyssal Maze, Chaos, all the dungeons that you would want. And this is very much including new tiered content as well that might be coming out, say, next year, the year after. It's modular, and it's just a blanket system that you can kind of plug and play as the devs see fit. And as an example of things you can plug and play, if we come back to the regular Dark Forest tree, obviously you have things in here like boosters and the fast forward button. These things are relatively new and weren't in the game as, up to a month ago. This fast forward button for Daily Maze just came in the last major patch, I believe. This came out with the Champions Quest system that came out at the beginning of the year. This Undead Grounds, even though Undead Grounds came out a little bit ago, the booster just came out maybe, a month or two ago? So, point being, as the devs are coming up with new content, new rewards, and things like that, they can plug and play it into any of these systems that they'd like, including for new players. And why might they really care about going through all this effort for the new players? Well, obviously, they're the next generation of players. You need to help them out a bit. But to that point, devs can absolutely customize this to help new players, not just by the rewards, but by these little guys over here, which you may or may not have already noticed. These percent chances are very different than Dark Forest. You have a 5% chance for a mythic drop here, which is pretty bananas. Developers have access to all their figures and numbers about what players are doing, what content they're running, where players might be getting stuck, player retention numbers, where players are getting bored and where they seem to not be logging on anymore, things like that. And if you were to notice, for example, let's say new players, they go through all the other game modes that Hunt Royale offers when you first start, and then they finally come to, say, Dragon. It's intriguing enough with new items and armor and the whole system of equipping your character. They get into Kraken and they finally get to Yeti, and boom, they hit a wall and they just can't really get past it. It hasn't grabbed them enough to want to keep playing, so now they just peter off and, I'll come back to this game, and then they never do. For me personally, I tried really hard to get through Yeti because I knew from looking up online that getting to Maze is the first point where stones will start to drop and also the potential of legendary armor. And that, once I got to that tier, was my hook, line, sinker moment. So if developers are noticing that a lot of players aren't getting to that point, again, they can swap out these numbers. And that might look something like this. So you go from, say, 5% on a mythic all the way up to, say, 10%. 20% for an epic, and you take the difference of 10% from the green. So now common is not as common. It went down from 50% to 40%, but you've increased the two very lucrative things. And if you look at some of these rewards that I just have in here off the top of my head, these, especially in the Mythic, are kind of godsends for brand new players. When someone's stuck on, say, Kraken or something like that, can you imagine randomly just just from playing the game, not from opening chests, not from, not from opening your 30 chests in a row, not from getting tokens, none of that stuff. You just are playing the game and all of a sudden a mythic option pops up and you would be rewarded with a brand new hunter, or even the brand new hunter chest where you get to select between the two, which is even better. That's massive. And then when you get to your epic rewards and things like that, you've got the introduction of your stones. And these stones typically don't start dropping until a player were to get to maze. You've got the option of getting gear delivered and streamlined to these brand new players faster so that they can really see the light at the end of the tunnel, or have the tunnel open up and then they can come out and start enjoying the rest of the game. You can really start to infuse loot into a brand new account for a new player by doing something like this, which would then kind of fast forward their experience and let them catch up to the pack, as it were, a little bit faster. Try to get them through maze, try to get them through abyssal maze, obviously get them into chaos as fast as possible so they can start farming up their gear and things like that. Point being, you want to get them into dark forest as fast as possible so that they can start enjoying the current content that everyone else is playing. You could really customize this as you'd want from a developer standpoint. Obviously, when it comes to loot, I just have as examples, +5 character tokens for any character that they might already have unlocked. These tokens, while pretty small and farmable, would be very nice for a brand new player. Being able to level up a hunter from, say, level 3 to level 4, or finally getting an ability slot unlocked for a hunter, massive, massive things. And that's another thing. You could also put abilities in here for new players to unlock as well. Their first common pool is basically nothing but hunter tokens. Second pool is the same exact thing. You still have a bloated pool of hunter tokens, but now you're starting to add in things like boosters, chest, your Kraken, your Yeti, your Dragon tokens, and things like that. And when you get into purple, you start getting your chests, more boosters, probably higher quantity of boosters, your gemstones, and then obviously your big chests for each one of those game modes. All that to say, I think all this influx of loot, the dopamine hits, all that stuff would really create a better brand new player experience and try to get them out of those early levels so that they can start farming stuff that would actually be useful to them. Now, if you were to increase the percent chance for things like this, you might have players that are working on higher tiered content falling back to older content to farm. So, for example, if you had a 20% chance of getting these gemstones and you can clear, abyssal maze in, 60 seconds, just keep throwing your hunters at the boss until you win. Maybe things could be a little broken as far as farming things per hour goes. Things you could do to combat that would be implement an account-wide diminishing return for previous content. And that would be set and designated by, let's just say, maximum gear score equipped on this account. So once you hit a certain threshold for gear score, these percentages would have diminishing returns for you for previous content. So that would weed out the concept of putting on lower tiered gear to try to go back to farm this stuff. But it would also protect new players. One of the things that's so great about helping out buddies who come and join this game is they might have a new account. And if you have a super juiced account, maybe you can take them into chaos runs. Maybe you can take them into dark forest runs and you can power level them. You can boost them. And that's really fun for a new player. They get access to things and rewards that they normally would not get. But if you were to restrict that, saying, hey, as soon as you clear 10 levels of dark forest, now you've implemented your diminishing returns on previous tiers worth of loot. Once that new player goes back to the content that they should be playing, now they're having diminishing returns, so that could become a mess. So yeah, I think there's ways that you could restrict cheese, I guess you could say, for higher end players for things like that, just because they can clear content so fast. They probably shouldn't be able to collect all of this stuff in seconds as compared to a new player. All right, so going back to Dark Forest, this system is extremely modular and you can really tailor it to help issues that might be arising. So for example, the new Abyssal mode just came out. The new Abyssal Dark Forest just came out. The player base was a little upset that they didn't have access to their Dark Forest gems anymore. The developers have come out and said that, hey, this mode is specifically for farming scraps and schematics. You have a much higher chance of doing this at the cost of not having Dark Forest gems. So they kind of want you to still maintain farming Dark Forest for your gems and things like that. But you go to Abyssal to get, your power, basically. And yeah, if people were really unhappy with that, instead of just adding just a blanket, hey, here are Dark Forest gems on every single level of Abyssal, now you can add it to this system, add it into green, very low counts, add it also to blue, add it also to purple, add it also to mythic. Mythic being like, as an example, hey, if you hit a mythic Dark Forest gem payout, maybe that's 1,000, whatever the number might be, 1,000 Dark Forest gems. Yeah, again, this is a system that opens itself up to just kind of modifying and tweaking a player experience if people aren't happy. And speaking of things that devs could do with this system, thinking outside the box just a little bit. I swear this is my last point before we head over and start talking about this stuff. The devs have a system here where they can put rewards in here, but they don't just have to be, say, currency, monetary rewards, things like that. You can start to add in things that maybe you'd codename prizes, things like that. I'm sure you guys have noticed this stuff right here, and you're kind of scratching your head. So these are what I might deem prizes. So you can add in things such as skins, frames, tombstones, portraits. I would even say the possibility of an actual mythic hero into a mythic drop. And the only way to get that mythic hero is to have a mythic drop chance of him. You can add in custom glow effects. You can make mode unique rewards, such as, oh, hey, you're playing Dark Forest. Here is a small pool of rewards that can only be found while playing Dark Forest. Here's a unique tombstone, frame, whatever it might be. And you could do that for all the different previous tiers. Again, if you wanted to. Hey, you're playing Dragon. Here is, again, a unique tombstone, unique frame for Dragon, Yeti, Kraken, Maze, all that stuff. And then when you get to Chaos, every single level. So if you're playing Chaos mode, but you're playing the Dragon level, the Dragon pool of rewards would be activated for that Dragon level. You could do a lot of crazy stuff with that. This concept that I have right here, I thought was really cool. A lot of games do this. This this actually gets me thinking back to 1080 for Nintendo 64 because yeah, that game's awesome. These crystal skins for each character in the game. So you'd have the common, you'd be like metallic silver. Any character in the game, your entire model is gold. This is clearly a much rarer skin. And then the last one would just be the prismatic. Your character is made out of crystal, so their entire skin is just a prismatic shards of light or rays of light shining through them. It would just look really cool. But I mean, the point with these skins is that they would just be very rare, and it would be kind of a thing to show off to people. If you're queuing up with a random person and they have this skin for whatever hero that might be that they have, that's just a really cool thing to have and a really cool thing to show off. It's these chase items that you put into the game that not necessarily, like I said, no monetary reward, no power added to your account. I mean, skins give you +1 damage, but you know what I mean? Just fun little rewards that can be put in the mix for a reward pool for any tier that you'd want. Yeah, there's a lot of potential with this system. So many things could be added, could be tweaked, could even be removed. Hey, we're trying to get players away from, maybe running maze or these daily maze and all these things. Instead, we want end game players to now focus on this different form of farming, whatever. Yeah, just remove these things out of end game loot tables. All right. So, anyways, let's go talk about those other coveted rewards. All right. So, here we have our unique Mystery Hunter rewards. Currently have 16 designed right now, but there is obviously room from the devs to create more as they see fit, maybe based off player feedback and whatnot. Some of these rewards are really strong. So, possibly diluting the pool a little bit more with some other choices might be useful so that some of these don't hit as much as they could. Since these are all icon based, I would imagine that something could happen in game where you could click and hold on the reward and like a little pop out window would show up saying like, hey, this is what this does. And here are the modifiers or things that they could do. Here's the percent modifiers they could do, things like that. The other thing real quick is you'll notice these have 3 different types of borders. If we zoom in here at the top, you've got 3 good examples. So this first one is solid blue, second one is solid red, and the third one is a hybrid solid red with streaks of blue. So the first one would just simply be that, hey, if you select this reward, this reward will remain in the draw pool. So you could get this a second time or possibly even a third time if you're really lucky during the same run. The red means that, hey, this is a one and done, and the effect is going to be persistent for the remainder of your levels that you're running. And then the third option is a little bit of both, obviously. The effect will be persistent for the remainder of your run. However, it can show up in your draw pool once again, typically just indicating that the effect that it offers will stack upon itself. So yeah, let's get started on explaining some of these. First up, we have the perk codenamed Arrows. This is a lingering persistent effect, but also can be repeatable subsequently, stacking upon itself. So basically, all this one does is reduces the chance for green rewards to show up in your draft pool, while then increasing the chance for blue, purple, and reds to show up. Since this is repeatable and stackable, you could get some nice benefits into maybe doubling or tripling the chance of a mythic to show up for you, while also reducing the clutter of greens that no one really wants. Here we have the Mystery Reveal perk. This is a one-time use persistent effect. This would reveal both hunters in column 4 permanently for the remainder of your run. And I say it would have to be both for two reasons. One, you want to justify picking something like this over, say, column 1, 2, or 3, where they actually give you monetary rewards. And you might not, even though your hunters are revealed, you might not ever actually end up using hunters from that column for the remainder of your run. So, in order to justify picking this as a perk that you want to utilize, I think revealing both would be fair. All right, here we go. The 2x modifier. Simply put, this one just doubles the rewards from either column 1, 2, or 3, and it works on all rarity of rewards. Obviously, everyone looks at the mythic right here. The concept of, let's just say, a schematic gets to drop, the concept of doubling that, so then you just walk away with 2 schematics, is pretty insane. Absolutely. The thing is, it's twofold. First of all, that's a really, really rare situation for that to occur. So let's think about this. You have a mythic that has a 0.5% chance to drop. That's a roughly, on average, about 200 runs before you even see a mythic. Then you have to get this 2x modifier to show up. This is being pulled from a pool of 16, as you've seen, possibly even more if the devs wanted to add more of these rewards. So that in and of itself is kind of a unicorn situation. But if that wasn't enough, you still have to beat the level with your one of the 2 mystery hunters that are above you. And those could just simply be bad picks. So really hard to make this happen. But the other half of the argument is that while sure, the rewards can be absolutely extreme, when something like this happens, that's such an unreal moment to happen that would be promoted by the player. They would go tell their friends, they would tell their guildmates, they'd probably go to some form of social media, Reddit or Discord or something like that to show off their rewards. Like, oh my God, this actually happened. Look what I got. And I feel like that just puts a lot of good vibes into the community. It's really exciting. The prospect of something like that happening, it's just really cool. And if it does happen to you, man, go buy a lotto ticket because that's really awesome. And I just think that's a really fun concept. Now, to actually use something like this, I have a little demonstration pulled up. So, for example, we have a mythic drop here, right? And this is scrap. So, great. Unfortunately, I've got 2 really bad heroes or hunters to select from. So, then I would come over here to my mystery hunters and be like, okay, would this be worthwhile to use? Oh man, I have a 2x modifier here. Absolutely, I want to do this because now I can get double the scraps just for doing this. So, because we're dealing with a mythic here, I would argue it would definitely be worthwhile to use some gems just to reveal some hunters. Because, maybe one of these is an S tier hunter and it would just make this a cakewalk. So, if that's the concept, you come up here and you'd click on this gem so you could reveal this. So, what you would do is you'd click that and a dialog window would pop up. Are you sure you want to spend 10, possibly 20 gems to reveal this hunter? You'd hit OK and boom. That's your revealed hunter. Wow, you got Plague Doctor. Lucky you. So, you'd close out of that. And now Plague Doctor is revealed. So what you would do is you would just select Plague Doctor. And when you do that, a window pops up. Hey, you are selecting this reward. It's a 2x modifier. Which reward would you like this to be applied to? Which reward would you like doubled? So obviously, hopefully, you'd click the mythic. And then from there, you get another confirmation window just in case you're fat fingering stuff because, oh my God, can you imagine having a 2x modifier in a mythic and accidentally fat fingering a green? That would be grounds for buying a new phone. Just saying. Then you would just confirm this, and then boom, you'd spawn into the match with Plague Doctor per usual. So that's how that reward would work, and I think it would be pretty fun. Next up, we have the mystery reward. This would just give you one random reward from one of the 3 rarities, blue, purple, and red. Like I said earlier, probably fairly common for you to get columns 1, 2, and 3 showing as a green reward. Probably not the best. So it would be worth it for you to pick, say, this reward using one of the 2 mystery hunters, just so you're guaranteed to, at minimum, get a blue reward. But yeah, nice little alternative to just seeing nothing but green. Here we have the collect all reward. If you were to clear the level with one of the two mystery hunters, you'd collect the rewards from columns 1, 2, and 3. This is kind of a variable reward in that, if you have columns 1, 2, and 3 all showing green rewards, is it really worth it to push your luck and potentially brick a run just so you could get 3 greens? Maybe not. If you have a really good hunter in one of the green columns, you may as well just clear with that. However, if you got really lucky and you got, say, 2 blues and a purple showing, then absolutely the incentive is there for you to try to clear it with one of the mystery hunters and collect all the rewards. So this is the only blue reward. Basically, what it does is it removes green, purple, and red drops from the pool of random rewards that could spawn and replaces them with guaranteed blues. Kind of removes the fun of, I might get a purple, I might get a red, and replaces it with something more reliable of, blue rewards are good enough. They're much better than, the alternative, which is seeing green after green after green. Since this is a red bordered reward, this is a one-time pick, and it would persist for the remainder of your run. Now we come to my personal favorite reward in the game. I think it really encompasses what this entire system I kind of came up with is meant to accomplish. That being, of course, player fun, player freedom, player interaction, player agency, all that stuff, as opposed to being confined to like a traditional hunter draft or static draft mode or something like that. So let's talk about it. What does it do? So Group Quest simply mimics the reward from one player to the next. So let's say that, player 1 over here gets, a really good chest drop or something like that. This player could mimic that reward, and he in turn would also get a chest reward. Now, looking back at the other rewards in this pool, let's take a look at some of the interactions we could get. Now, we've already talked about a handful of these, but moving forward as we explain these other rewards, you can keep in the back of your mind like how these might interact with Group Quest when we get to them. But since we've already explained these, we'll just use these as an example. And the first one I can think of is the 2x, because that just offers probably the best rewards. So here we go. So we got player 1 over here and player 2 right here. Let's go ahead and use the same example as we were using before when we were explaining how 2x worked. Let's say they get the coveted mythic, and let's just say it's a schematic for argument's sake. They want to use their 2x on that schematic, so then they'll end their run with an additional 2 schematics. Group Quest, player 2 over here, wants to mimic that. So they also are going to run a random hero, and they will be rewarded with whatever player 1 gets rewarded with. So instead of actually getting the 2x reward for the Group Quest so that player 2 could then use a 2x on one of their own rewards, let's just say they're over here, what would happen is the way Group Quest works is it mimics the reward that the other player ends up receiving. So in this case, sure, their reward is the 2x modifier, but what they end up with as a reward would be 2 schematics. So in this case, player 2 would mimic that. This player would also get 2 schematics. So talk about a holy grail unicorn moment that would most likely never happen. But what a moment if it did. What an exciting thing to think about. This reward is called 3 random greens, and it does exactly what it says it does. And that if you were to select this, your reward would be 3 separate randomized green rewards at the same time. Seeing as how green rewards would be fairly common. So, for example, column 1, column 2, column 3 might all just be green rewards. Instead of just picking one of those green rewards and getting a not so great reward, you may as well try to push your luck and instead get 3 randomized green rewards all at the same time. Just a little bit of a profit. Not necessarily the best perk, but it is better than your typical rewards that you may otherwise be collecting. Here we have the replace random select reward. This is a permanent ability, a one-time use, where you replace the 4th column that would have your random hero selects and the option to get these unique rewards, and just replace it with another column, just like the first 3, that has the potential of spawning in a mythic as shown here in the graphic. If you don't want to have to worry about dealing with the blind picks and you'd rather just have another chance at getting a blue, purple, or even a mythic, then yeah, this is the perk for you. Dealer's choice is a pretty straightforward one. If you select it, a dropout menu will appear where it'll have, if not every single blue drop, most of them. And you can scroll through and specifically select a blue reward from the blue loot table as your reward. This reward I call third player. It is a one-time use and persists for the remainder of your run. And what it does is it removes the capability for mythics to drop in your run, but increases columns 1, 2, and 3 maximum hunter count from 2 to 3. So column 1 would have 3 hunters, column 2 would have 3 hunters, and column 3 would have 3 hunters. The idea here being getting rid of a very low probability that you'd even see a mythic in exchange to more consistently be able to collect rewards from tiers 1, 2, and 3 if good rewards were to pop up for them. This reward is called One for All. And what it does is it actually removes columns 1, 2, and 3 and just replaces it with one big column or pool of hunters. And then you can select any of those 6 hunters now and then collect any of the rewards at the bottom. So let's say you wanted to select this hunter up here in the upper left hand corner, but you wanted to select these gems down here as your reward. You could now do that. This is a one time use persistent reward for the duration of your run. Here we have the reward called Rarity Upgrade. This is probably pretty busted, so let's talk about it. So what this would do is once you've selected this and won your level, the next character select screen you go to, when it generates its loot rarity, it will have these modified. So all green loot would then turn into blue loot, all blue loot would turn into purple, and all purple loot would turn into mythic. So basically, you're guaranteeing that your loot pool for your next level that you're going to play is at least bare minimum all blue. Chances are pretty good. I think it was like 30% chance for blue. So you have a 30% chance now that you're going to get purple. And the big broken part is you would have normally a 10% chance for a purple to spawn. Now that's turning into a mythic. So now you've given yourself a 10% chance for mythic to spawn. Very fun, very cool, but mathematically probably a little broken, especially when you look at the other mystery rewards that you can also be chaining together with something like this, which we'll take a look at in just a second. I think probably the safest bet to do to just kind of make this a little more balanced is just remove this bottom rung. So just allow it so all greens turn into blues and all blues turn into purple. But hey, that's not very fun. So the mythic stays. But yeah, if you go ahead and look at the other rewards, for example, this is where things could get a little out of whack when it comes to balance. So for example, you got this reward right here. We already discussed it where it just turns the probabilities all into guaranteed blue drops. So no matter what, column 1, 2, and 3 will always be blue drops. If you had something like this already rolling and then you got something like that, well, you're getting guaranteed 3 blues, and those blues now turn into purple. So now you've just guaranteed giving yourself 3 purples. Again, very fun, not too bad, but very fun. You look at something like this, where it lowers the probabilities of greens to spawn in general, while raising the chance for blue, purple, and red to spawn. And obviously, this is kind of repeatable. So maybe you get at least 1, maybe 2 of these. Then you get something like this to trigger. Greens have a lower percent chance to drop, so you're mostly going to get blues. Blues are now purples. You have even a higher chance for purples to spawn, which now means you have, say, like a 15% chance, whatever it might be, for a mythic to spawn now, which is crazy because this affects the next hunter select screen. So it's already active, which means another perk is now activated in the pool. So, for example, if you got lucky and got a 15% chance to get a mythic, now the 2x modifier becomes even more broken. So, it's just the way all these kind of work together, albeit very fun. A lot of cool combinations you can come up with here. Yeah, like I said, might be a little out of whack with this purple turning into mythic, but hey, we're having fun, so it stays for now. So here we have the reward called Double the Fun. This is a persistent ongoing reward that can be repeatable. So what it would do is it would permanently remove a hunter choice from one of the columns. And since this is repeatable, let's just say it goes from left to right. So the first time you grab this, column 1 would permanently have one of its hunters removed for the rest of your play. What would be replaced in its stead would be another loot choice. So you'd only ever have in column 1 hunter choice, but 2 loot choices. And that would look something like this. So for example, you just selected Double the Fun. What would happen on your next hunter select is the second hunter here would disappear and get replaced. In this case, it's a blue loot table. It would get replaced by another randomly assigned blue piece of loot. And that would look something like this. So here you go. In this case, you would select Grim Reaper, and then you'd be able to choose one of these 2 rewards as your reward. Now, something you could do to really double the fun is simply just delete that. So now what would happen is you select Grim Reaper, and now you just get both of these rewards. That would get really crazy, obviously, if this was, say, a mythic. Being able to select Grim Reaper and be able to collect two separate mythic rewards would be, again, really doubling the fun. But if you want to go Kerplad with your fun, if you had a teammate who had group quest, now they're group questing, you're double the fun, and now you're just having too much fun and too many mythics, which, I don't know, from a gamer standpoint, is not a bad thing. From a dev standpoint, it's probably the devil, but it is what it is. Speaking of double fun, this is called double mystery choice. It's very similar to double fun, except this specifically affects column 4. So same thing, you would permanently cancel out one of the random hunters and you would replace it with another one of these specialty loot options. This would end up being one or the other. You wouldn't be able to have both of these specialty rewards just because there'd be too many problems that could cause. But these are powerful enough where it is choosing one or the other is actually really good, especially when if there's something that you're hunting for. Let's just say you're trying to get, let's say you're trying to go for the all blue reward and just get all blues as fast as possible. This will get you there faster. So, if you're going 1 through 10 on Dark Forest, you get this turn 1. That means you'll have 9 levels of nothing but blues, or whatever the other. You can go hunting easier for other specialty rewards doing this. Obviously it's difficult, you only have 100 to do so, but yeah, it's a good little engine builder. And last but not least, we have our last reward. This is the 3 times green reward multiplier. This is actually kind of similar to another reward we talked about, which would be this guy, the 3 green rewards. They are different. So the 3x would say, hey, I have a green reward here, and I would like to multiply that reward by a quantity of 3. So I'm getting 3 times the amount of that specific reward. Whereas this guy is, hey, I don't like any of my options. Just give me 3 random green rewards. I don't really care what they are. So how this would look is like, for example, you had these. Let's just say, oh, I happen to be farming blue gems. I'd rather get, a bunch of level 1 blue gems than, maybe anything else like here. Maybe I'm capped on refreshes. I don't really care about chests because who knows what would be inside there. This is exactly what I'm looking for, even if it is only a level 1. But yeah, so this will be a level 1 drop, maybe 1 to 2 gems you get. If you multiply that by 3, you could get upwards of 6 level 1 blue gems, which would equate out to 2 level 2 gems once you've upgraded them. And it's like, yeah, it's not so bad. At least I can target farm a specific thing that I need if it were to present itself. And again, if I didn't like any of these rewards, I would have picked something like this, which would just give me 3 random green rewards, which I have no control over what I'm getting. So that would be the difference between these two. Hey, we made it. I never thought that explanation would end. But let me go ahead and circle back around to these percentages like I said I would. So just to briefly illustrate, let's use Epic as an example. It's got a 10% drop chance. So with that 10%, I was implying that each column would have a 10% chance to spawn the epic. Unfortunately, that's not exactly how it works due to the law of probability. Since I have 3 different columns, it's not a 10% chance for me to be given an epic because there are 3 separately rolled columns. It would actually be quite a bit more. And the best way I could demonstrate this is heading on over to our friendly neighborhood ChatGPT, where I gave it a simple prompt, kind of like a game show prompt. Feel free to go ahead and pause this and look it over. I felt as though it gave a very succinct and quite good explanation and an example of how this all works. So, having taken all this, I made a little spreadsheet here. And sorry, it's ugly, but it demonstrates a few things. So, I took mythics as an example to talk about because that's where the real problem would ultimately lie. So, if we were to come back over here and see these modifiers, you remember this little guy, how I was saying he was going to be an issue earlier and how it would just be easier to remove the purple turning to mythics? Well, in this case, we decided to keep it. Let's say that this hits, okay? Purple by default has a 10% spawn chance according to our percentages. That would now be funneled into Mythic. Now, Mythic would have a 10% chance to spawn. So if we go to our spreadsheet, let's say Mythic has a 10% chance to spawn. You go through all the different steps. It would generate 27% of the time at least 1 Mythic reward for you to choose from. Needless to say, that's a little broken. If we were to pump that up to 12%, again, due to, say, this reward, you get this to hit twice. Each time this procs, purple goes up 1% in rarity. That's the 2%. Now purple has a 12% chance to hit. In this case, 12% would now apply to mythics. You have a 32% chance for a mythic to show up in any of those columns. So here's our probability problem. Earlier, when I was talking about these percentages, I said, let's just kind of go with it for now. And the reason I was saying that is because let's just presume these are the outcomes we want. We want mythics to land 0.5% of the time. When you look at this spreadsheet, if we come down here, you can see that there is a solution that would give an outcome of 0.5% of the time a mythic would show up in any of the columns visible. On the back end, when it comes to the formula, due to the rules of probability and there being 3 columns, mythics would actually have a 0.16% chance to drop. Coming back to this arrows perk, the way it would normally work is, yeah, green would go down, the others would go up. Typically speaking, we would want the mythic chance to go up by 0.2%. We can now get that outcome here. So sure, it would start from 0.5% chance of showing up to 0.7% chance to show up. On the back end, you'd go from 0.16 to 0.23. And since I have this pulled up, I thought it'd be interesting. We took a look at this perk once more. At face value, this doesn't seem to be the most fun or interesting or great perk. Again, you'd be giving up your mystery perk. You'd be giving up all these perks just to be gaining a 4th column. Well, it's actually not that bad of a perk, to be honest. If you were to come over here and see, these are what the probabilities turn into by just having a 4th column for you to choose from. Now, the percentages are so small when it comes to mythics that they're largely unaffected. But when you look at the other rewards, say a baseline 10% chance for purples or epics to show up, epic rewards to show up, you go from a 27% chance all the way up to basically a 35% chance. That's every 3 levels of Dark Forest, you're guaranteed to have an epic drop. If you were affected by arrows like we were talking about earlier and you brought your chance up to a baseline 12% chance, that's a 40% chance that you're going to see a purple. And you could change this, let's see, blues, for example. If you change that to a baseline 30% for blues, the 4 columns, you'd have a 76% chance for a blue to show up. So again, this little guy is a pretty reliable source of getting nice loot. And especially if you were to pair it with, say, arrows or something like that, maybe double the fun, all that good stuff. Just kind of makes it a little bit more useful than one might initially think. My next thought would be to balance something like this. If these rewards were just too crazy, which honestly they definitely are, as is, as pitched, that are definitely too crazy. But again, since we're trying to maintain the fun, how could you limit the amount of rewards gained over a course, over a period of time? And this is kind of similar to the concept I had for my initial pitch with the Dark Forest gems, putting a cap on it, diminishing returns, all that stuff. But you could apply a system like this they already have in the game. So currently for an event, they actually just reworked the daily bonus you can get for earning rewards for an event. And I think this system is really cool, by the way. I think you could apply a system like this to a daily lockout or daily reset or just a 24-hour period where instead of, say, the current example they have is up until this point, you'll get a bonus of rewards. And then once you meet a certain threshold for farming for that day, the bonuses will either diminish or just disappear completely. And you're allowed to continue farming up to another certain point where you can receive this special token. In this case, it's a pumpkin. We just had Halloween. This could be a similar option you could do for a 24-hour lockout period for these rewards, say in Dark Forest. Hey, you're allowed to clear X amount of levels getting all these rewards, but once you've hit X amount of successful clears and you've claimed this amount of rewards and things like that, slowly you'd get diminishing returns, so you're collecting less and less rewards, or simply the rewards after a certain point could just disappear and you would just revert back to a typical 8-man draft with static selection. And by doing something like that, you could easily just give each one of the rarities a point allotment. So let's just say, just to keep it simple, a successful clear with a random hunter using a green reward would give you 1 point. With blue, let's say it would go all the way up to 3. With a purple, successful purple clear, let's say that would just jump up to 10 points. And then if you got, say, a mythic or something like that, that could go all the way up to 20, 25, right? And those numbers could be compiled and added together. And then once you hit, say, I don't know, 1,000 points in a 24-hour lockout period, 500 points in a 24-hour lockout period, that's when the diminishing returns would start to kick in. So this would kind of help the casuals out a little bit, where players who are logging on every day and putting in a lot of rounds, they can't just run away with the loot, as opposed to somebody who can only has time to play a couple of games a day or a few games a week, whatever it might be. This is a way you could put a nice little cap on the player base using a system you basically already have implemented. Next thought would be just adding indicators on the static list for, casual players who aren't necessarily going for challenge modes, just to represent on the characters that they are actually available in the current challenge select window and color code them. And it could just be a dot in the upper right hand corner of the portrait, or it could maybe possibly be a highlighted border around it, just something to draw the eye of someone who's just scrolling through here looking for a typical static pick. Oh, hey, I was going to pick Rocky because Rocky's super cool. But I know I can clear this level with somebody equivalent to Axemaster, and look, he's giving me a blue reward. So that might just catch their eye and cause them to, I don't know, maybe scroll up and, oh, hey, look, Axemaster's here. Oh, if I do that, I'll get a fast forward button. Just some sort of an indicator for players just to know that, hey, these are actually chosen heroes. So if you think you can clear this level with them, even though you have your challenge select closed, oh yeah, take a look at them, see what the reward is. And coming back to additional prizes that you could do, I forgot to mention this earlier, but while we were on the concept of, custom skins and stuff like that, like little rewards or trophies, so to speak, that you could show off to the player base, other things you could add into these as well would be unique player portraits. So you have, trading card games and things like that. You got Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, all that type of stuff, where like chase cards are foilies, or at least that's how they called them when I was a kid. But, you got the holographics in the background and they're very shiny and interesting. So, yeah, you could take that and just implement that onto actual character portraits in the game so that people would want to chase after them. Oh, hey, I like having the pumpkin head as my portrait that just came out for the last Halloween event. There's a chase item in there that maybe only shows up around Halloween time. And if I get that rare player card to show up, it would be a cool holographic pumpkin head that I could use year round. Be a nice little flex on fellow guildies that you're just, better than them. That's all. And while we're talking about the incentives of using this system, you could also add in tracked stats for this. So if you were to go to a player profile, you could actually see how many times they've successfully cleared a level using this random system, or how many successful clears they've had using the mystery hunters. I mean, they already are tracking stats for, equivalent game modes. So you can just see how many times you've cleared chaos levels and things like that. But you could also tie in rewards to that, similarly to how they did it with Torment, and how they've actually just done it with Abyssal Dark Forest with the introduction of the Mimic hero, where you have to actually play and clear a certain amount of content before you unlock that reward. You could do something very similar here as well. And you could, after, say, I don't know, 500 levels of clearing using random hunters, you unlock the hunter. If you end up clearing 1,000 levels using random hunters, you'll unlock a skin. And if you successfully clear 2,000 levels, you get his third skin, which would be very, very rare. And yeah, it would be just another prestige thing on your account that you could show off to other players. I thought I previously mentioned earlier in the video, but just in case you kind of skimmed through this, I did mention that Papa Kicks did confirm that they are planning to continue their buffing of old releases to bring them up to current power levels or metas, so that this would be, I'm not saying these guys need to become S tier characters, but maybe B tier characters. And okay, maybe that's reasonable enough for you with your current skill set and gear that, yeah, maybe you could actually collect a mythic here now. So hopefully this will, as time goes on, they start to buff their roster. This would become more and more convenient to use. I would also like to address Abyssal Dark Forest coming out during the creation of this video. Obviously, they kind of reinvented the way they do their character selection when it comes to the random draft process. There are a lot of pros and cons to this new system. Overall, I think it's definitely a step up from, what we've seen in the past with the draft system. But honestly, this video is it's just too stupidly long. And I don't really think anybody wants to hear me get into the pros and cons of this in this video. If for some reason the feedback would be useful to Boombit or something like that, or you guys just want to hear for some reason, like, I would gladly go into this and give a deep dive on this, give my thoughts on this. As I said, I do think this is a better system than what they had. I think it's a step up. I really like the concept to be able to see all your heroes first so that you're not going to brick a run. You can plan everything out. I don't know. It's just, I can get into this, but I just won't. And there would be ways to possibly bring in some of the concepts that I had in my pitch and apply it here. Adding some columns, maybe possibly adding mystery hunters. If you don't like your 8 hunters, you could always, gamble and try to get some, another S tier hunter from the mystery picks. Maybe get some rewards. Another thing for you to think about when you're drafting. Not only are you trying to plan out your 1 through 5 in an Abyssal Dark Forest run, but maybe now I have to pick up some of these rewards. There's things you could do to tweak this, but yeah, again, just not really going to get into it, but pretty cool overall, I'd say. Definitely a step in the right direction. So to wrap things up, I just want to circle back to the original Discord conversation and review that core list of ideas that was being discussed and compare it to my pitch and see how it holds up. So number one and number two, as we said, were very similar, but in the Discord conversation, they were treated as two separate points. So I'm going to treat them as two separate points here. Player optimize out their own fun. The only optimization that's really happening with my system is for the player's benefit directly, and also in a fun way. This isn't necessarily, let's put a roadblock in front of the player and see how they can figure out a way to get around it. This is very much a, hey, if you want to take the time to sit there and optimize what rewards or how are you going to do it and all the different paths that you can take to achieve these things, it's only to your benefit. And then number two, the same 10 hunters. And of course, it's still a random system. And now you actually have the addition of 2 mystery hunters, which is a new mechanic, never seen in the game before. So number three, poor energy with loot, holds back steady progression. While I wouldn't say that my system directly combats, because again, this player was referring to, hey, I got a schematic to drop, and of course, it's the 8th time in a row I've gotten a terrible schematic. When am I getting the coveted hit points to damage, schematic, something like that? While this doesn't directly, you can't just necessarily get a reward that'll choose a schematic for you to have. There's a lot of loot being offered up here. So, in a roundabout way, I'm just throwing goodies at your account. And in the case of the mythics and things like that, you've got your schematic and your schematic pieces. So, while I would say it wouldn't directly answer this guy's request, it is just so much loot falling down in your face. I don't know how you could say that you won't be getting steady progression out of this. So I would definitely say number three is satiated. Number four, progressing for a new player is just easier when they have 10 static picks. Absolutely, this is covered. Any new player can just scroll down to the static list and they can choose 10 hunters, especially when they have a very small roster of hunters. Absolutely. You pick 10, you start putting tokens into those guys, you start getting abilities, try to get them awakened. Absolutely, you can use those guys. Sure, you're not going to be able to participate in the hopefully minor rewards of going and doing random picks, but hey, if you want to progress, you can. Nothing is holding you back on that. Number five, randomness creates an issue and might brick a run with a hunter pick. While I would say my system is basically RNG stacked on top of RNG, it definitely does tackle the viable hunter pick because even if you don't get your viable hunters in your first 6 picks, you still have your mystery hunters. You can push your luck with those two things. Or the obvious, again, scroll down, pick any hunter that you want. So, absolutely out the window. Number 6, ADF is a random select. Why change Dark Forest? This is kind of the entire crux of my argument is just put both in there. Yeah, exactly. Why pigeonhole half your player base into playing one of the two ways? No matter what, you're not going to make everybody happy regardless. This is probably the closest you can get. Just give them everything and players can sort it out themselves. However they want to play, they can play. Number 7, this is still sort of true in that when a God tier or S tier hunter pops up, you'd be very inclined to select it from the random select. But if, let's say, for example, you have a God tier pick that's showing a green reward, and maybe you have a B tier pick that's showing a mythic reward, it's not so much of a simple choice. The optimization now is removed from your quote unquote list that you've been running over and over again. And now it gets moved to, ooh, can I get that mythic? Because that mythic is going to be very useful to me. Now it becomes, how can I get that? Do I have to use a random hunter? Can I use one of the mystery hunters? What about my partner? Does my partner have an S tier pick that they can hard carry me on? Can I can I pick Rocky and they pick a god tier hunter and can we still win and I get my mythic? So yeah, you can still pick your god tier hunters, but there's so much more that you'd want to look over. It wouldn't be such a no-brainer by any means. So the next 5 points are what I came up with after the Discord conversation. So number 1, offering fun interactions both with hunter selection and with teammates. The mystery select abilities and how they can interact and chain off of one another and modify one another and possibly affect your teammate and how your teammate can even help you get rewards, as I just was talking about with the last point with, okay, can I pick Rocky and you pick someone who can hard carry? The communication's there. It's fun. It opens a dialogue. You guys can definitely work together to optimize your rewards that you will both be gaining. So absolutely that covers that. Number 2, problem solving for the benefit of the player, not simply a means to create an obstacle to overcome in order to complete content. So I went over this with the very first point just now that, yeah, like instead of just putting some sort of a roadblock in front of the player and be like, there you go, have fun, figure out a way to get around this and complete the level that you just want to play anyways. Now it's more of a, there's no obstacle in your way. And if in the rare occasion there is, AKA you just got terrible picks in the random select screen, there are now several ways around that. There's the reroll button that was, always there, but it was once per round. Now you actually do have a way to get possibly more of those and possibly bank them up from game to game. You now have the mystery select hunter, two of them. So you got two additional choices that also draw from their own unique pool. So you might even get an additional hunter that you've already used that round. You've got a partner who could potentially hard carry you so that you can get, say, a reward that you're looking for. And you've also got your static list at the very bottom. So there's a bunch of stuff you could do here. And yeah, like I said, at the very end of the day, if there's an obstacle in your way, you don't need to go around. Just scroll down, grab the best hunter you can, and just plow through that sucker. Number 3, a framework designed for endless replayability and reusability. And yeah, this is a modular system that's designed to be, plug and play from the designer standpoint. As they come out with new abilities or perks or prizes, as I was pitching, they can just throw stuff into the system and it'll just elongate the replayability and the reusability. Obviously, as they go from game mode to game mode, you just customize out your rewards and you're good to go. Number 4, the system would be utilized across the board for old, current, future content. Absolutely. That was really important to me, especially with new players. I wanted the new player experience to be quite good and to hook them fast so that they want to keep playing and get to end game content. But absolutely. And then it's forward compatible with anything that would come out. You would just plug in your new rewards into it and you'd be good. Number 5, ultimately focusing on player satisfaction through meaningful self agency. And I don't know, I feel like my pitch was kind of the definition of that. The player can choose to play it any way they see fit. I mean, it even comes down to if they just want to have a chill night and just plop on a movie, watch a TV show, and they just want to do static picks, they want to shut off their brain and just go, you can do that. If you want to really min max your rewards, you can do that. You have a buddy that you're kind of boosting a little bit and they've got some amazing reward and you want to ensure the fact that they're going to get that, you can do that. You've got those fun interactions with group quests and things like that. Yeah. You get to choose how you want to interact with the content being the level that you're about to play any way you want. It's completely free, no restrictions. And yeah, I think it opens itself up for being a great time. And I think it also gives players a sense of real satisfaction because the system inherently leads them to believe that they are min maxing or like quote unquote gaming the system to try to squeeze out as much loot as possible from these crazy synergies from the mystery rewards. It really is a case of the more of an effort they put into trying to figure out how to gain loot and those rewards, just the more it benefits them in the end. It is a hurdle they can choose to overcome for their benefit or simply just to walk around and bypass it if they want to. And with that, I think I'm finally going to wrap up my TED Talk. If you managed to sit through this entire thing, you either died, fell asleep, walked away. I don't know. I just appreciate if you watch the whole thing. That's pretty crazy. In all seriousness, though, if you guys want to join in on this conversation, maybe you like what I had to say, maybe you hated what I had to say, maybe you would like to tweak some things, maybe you have some questions, whatever it is, feel free to write that stuff up in the comments down below. Doesn't just have to be me coming up with feedback for hopefully, possibly Papa Kicks or somebody from Boombit to review. They can read the comments and see how people even feel about this. They might even see the number of upvotes this gets, like a whole 7 upvotes. They might be like, wow, there's 7 people out there that really like this idea. We should probably sit down and give this some real thought. But really, if there's anything you guys want to add, feel free to put it down below. I'm probably going to read it. Hopefully, somebody from Boombit will read it too. And yeah, talk about these things all the time with my buddy when we're playing Hunt Royale. So I've got a lot of ideas. I've got a lot of ideas for this game. And they're ranging all the way from tiny little UI changes that would be really nice to have, all the way up to game defining brand new game modes that they could do. So yeah, I mean, if if anybody likes this stuff, I can try to keep putting out some more videos for you just for fun. I am gonna do everything in my power to keep it under a respectable 4 hours next time. Anyways, thanks for watching. Take care.